Let's take a look at some problems. Let's say on page 209, problems 3 through 38. We have a negative 3 times a positive 7. Okay, so we've got a negative number times a positive number, right? Got a negative number times a positive number. So therefore, we know that 3 times 7, that's 21, but it's going to be a negative 21, right? Okay, now if we have a negative 9 times a negative 5. Right. Now you could look at this as negative times negative is a positive, so you make them positive, and the negatives cancel each other out, and you get a positive 45. Okay? Now let's say that we have a negative 4 times a negative 2 times a negative 5. Now without the parentheses, it looks like negative 4 minus 2 minus 5. So you see why you have to have the parentheses there to show that it's multiplication. Okay? So we're looking at the first two, right? Which is negative 4 times negative 2. So these first two, we're going to make them negative 4 times negative 2. Yeah, you're going to get a positive 8, right? Times a negative 5. And you get negative 40. Alright? Any questions with that? Okay, now let's say that we wanted to say, alright, let's say we have a written phrase here. What is twice negative 10? Now technically, what is, you could look at this as x equals, twice means 2 times, right? If we have 10 students in the class, and let's say tomorrow we have twice that, that's 2 times 10, right? It's 20. Well, the same thing here. Only here we're working with 2 times a negative 10. And so that gives us a what? Negative 20. Now, you know, technically, the way when we had what is in the last unit, we had x equals the same, same thing. Well, if you just have 2 times negative 10, that's fine. That'll just be negative 20. But it's, the wording really hadn't changed any from the last unit to this one. Okay, let's say that we have what is the product of (20) and a negative 3. What is the product? When we say product, we mean what? Multiplication, right? So what you're saying here is the operation between those next two numbers. So you got 20, and we're saying the product of 20 and negative 3, so we're going to multiply 20 times negative 3. Okay, now let's look at this for a minute before we continue. The problem that students have here is that they're used to seeing the operation in between the numbers. Whereas here, the operation is first, and then you have the two numbers. Well, don't let that throw you off. You look at this operation as times, and then you look at, well, what are you multiplying? And then they give you the next two numbers. Alright? And so now 20 times a negative 3 is going to be what? 60. Alright? Any questions there? Okay, let's say that we want to evaluate these next problems here. We have a negative 8a. We want to evaluate negative 8a when a equals to a negative 24. Okay, so all this means is we're going to take that a and we're going to cut it out. And we're going to put parentheses in the place of that a, right? So this would be negative 8, parentheses, and what are we going to put in there for a? Negative 24. So we have a negative 8 times a negative 24, right? Well, that's negative times negative is a positive, right? And now what we have is 8 times 24 is, right, 192. Okay? Alright, any questions there? Okay, now let's say we want to evaluate 5 x, y, when x equals to a negative 9 and y equals to a negative 2. Okay, so we're going to cut out the x and we're going to put parentheses. And we're going to cut out that y and we're going to put parentheses there. And what's going to go in the parentheses for x? Negative 9, and what is going to go for parentheses for y? Negative 2. Okay? So, you see why we want to use that concept of cutting the x out, put parentheses. Because without the parentheses, you don't have multiplication, you got something else, right? So we want those parentheses there. Alright, so let's take a look at 5 times negative 9, and that's going to be what? Negative 45, and we're going to bring down times and minus 2, and so since we got, because it's a positive 5 and a negative 9, right, it's still going to be negative, but now we got a negative 45 and a negative 2, that's going to be a positive, right, because the negatives cancel out, and so we end up with positive 90, right, and if you want to put that plus sign there, to remind you, you got to check the signs, right?